Today, our preliminary title of the talk is Innovating the Periphery, Developing Radio Astronomy Technology and People in Africa with Radio Astronomy. And the speaker is Bernard Fanaroff. He is the South African astronomer and trained unionist and has been served in several positions in South Africa government from 1994 to 2000 related to the reconstruction and development program and to safety and security. And he did his first degree in Wits University in Johannesburg and PhD in Cavendish Laboratory in Cambridge on radio astronomy, and returned back in 1974 to Johannesburg and to teach physics at the Wits University and his research. And he became involved in very early stages of the organization of a new non-Russian independent trade union around Johannesburg in 1974, and left with us at the end of 1976 to work as a trade union organizer for the Metal and Allied Workers Union. And when the Metal and Allied Workers Union merged with other unions in the metal industry in 1987, and he was appointed as the National Secretary of the National Union of Metal Workers of South Africa. And in 1994, he was appointed as the Deputy Director General of the Office of the President Mandela and head of the Office for the Reconstruction and Development Program, which was government's central program and of the government's development planning branch. At the end of 1996, and he moved to the Ministry of Safety and Security, where he chaired the Integrated Justice System Board and the Interdevelopmental Committee for Board of Control, and led to the drafting of the Act, New Firearms Control Acts. And he left the government 2000, and he started the South Africa's SKA project as its director at the beginning of 2003, and retired at the end of 2015. The project includes our African bid for the SKA, the design construction of the MeerKAT and the observatory site at Losberg, and the Human Capital Development Program and the AVN. And he has a lot of experience in different government industries, in the trade unions, competitions, and now he is serving as the advisor in the Ministry of Trade, Industry, and Competition. And he will going to share a lot of experience in radio astronomy and as well as also the government duties. And I will invite Professor Bernard Fanaroff for giving his speech.
Thank you very much for that introduction. My thanks to Deborah Elm-Green and the IAU for giving me an opportunity to speak about a project which is very close to my heart, and congratulations also to Kevin Govender and his team for putting together this whole amazing event. And then thanks to Mpati Ramatsoku, who's one of our great early career researchers. She's agreed to share this time with me. And thanks also to Wendy, who's kept me more or less sane over this entire period. So we really are in a golden age of astronomy, and I am quite jealous of the young people who are going to benefit from the data that's going to come from all our new telescopes. I felt quite out of date when I walked through the exhibitions earlier, because it really is quite spectacular, the momentum that's been created on astronomy around the world with the new telescopes, and in particular in Africa. And for those of you who haven't been to the Soraya stand, I really recommend that you go there because it's an amazing stand and it's just an amazing experience to see what has been happening there and with the SKA project. So working on the South African SKA project and the MeerKAT telescope was one of the most exciting and fulfilling things I've done. I was privileged to work on what's really a one-of-a-kind project, but with an outstanding team of people who are totally committed to the project and to the good of the nation, and who taught me a huge amount about engineering and astronomy. So what little I know about engineering, I learned there. The African SKA bid and the design and construction of the MeerKAT telescope show what can be done when there's a convincing narrative and when a nation agrees what must be done and throws its best people at the problem. And throughout, we enjoyed unstinting support from the Department of Science and Technology, which was initially led by Rob Adam, and then by Phil Njwacha, and by all our science ministers, especially Naledi Pandor and Derek Hanekom, and the president of the National Research Foundation, Khotso Mokheli. And then following my retirement at the end of 2015, Rob Adam and now Poncho Maraping have led Soraya, and they've done a great job implementing our wonderful site and the wonderful telescope. And many people played a role in the project, and I apologize, I can't thank them all. But one point I want to make before I start on my slides, and that is that I've heard a story that the South African SKA site was chosen for political reasons because countries felt guilty about colonialism. And that was, in fact, a rumor that went around before the site selection was done, but it's completely wrong. If anything, the politics were the other way around. People were saying, you can't possibly build this in Africa. The site was chosen on the basis that it was an excellent site and an excellent proposal for the site. So let us go on to the slides. I'm going to talk about some of our history in Africa's bid to host the Square Kilometre Array, how we developed and constructed the MeerKAT radio telescope, and some of the innovative ways in which the MeerKAT, its technology and its site were conceptualized and constructed. And I've got concerns about how much data is going to come from all these telescopes, and Mpati is also going to talk about that. We've also had very innovative programs on human resource development and how we can grow a vibrant astronomy community in Africa. So I'll talk about that. And then Mpati is going to talk about her experiences in this process. So, of course, you'll be aware that Africa is the cradle of humankind, and some of the oldest symbolic representation and technology comes from Africa. At the Iziko Museum in Cape Town, you can see this piece of inscribed ochre, which is 77,000 years old. So the first democratic government in South Africa was elected in 1994, and in 1996 it published a white paper on science and technology, and two of the priorities were that we should do fundamental research, not only applied research in South Africa, and that we should use our geographical advantages, two of which are astronomy and paleontology, because if we don't do these things, we'll be a second-class nation forever, and that was not a future that we were prepared to accept. And the SKA, being a global big science project, fitted beautifully into what we required. It does fundamental science and it does innovative technology. So I apologize that this is a rather text-heavy slide. I want to make the point that the SKA project in South Africa was a project of the government, but they had the good sense to leave us outside government structures. So we had a lot of flexibility and we were able to move quickly, and we could make a lot of our own decisions. And Khotso Mokheli, who was the president then of the National Research Foundation, had challenged the astronomy community a bit earlier after the construction of SALT had started by saying, what's the next big thing we should do? And the answer amongst others, was we should become involved in the SKA. And Khotso says he was initially skeptical about astronomy, but when he was working on the SALT project, he realized that astronomy has an ability to appeal to and excite the public, which no other science has. So the NRF and the Department of Science and Technology formed a very small project team at the beginning of 2003 to bid for the SKA site. And as you know, the SKA is intended eventually to cover 3,000 kilometers with 2,000 dishes. So we involved 8 other African countries in our bid. And I think there was a convincing narrative as to why we should go for this telescope and how we should go for it. And the result was that as a mega project, everybody became very excited about it. The politicians trusted us, so we quickly got our own cabinet support. And then we got the support of the heads of state of the African Union. And we agreed that it was crucial to bid for this project because it would enhance our ability to get young people into STEM careers in Africa. And inside and outside South Africa, some people were very skeptical. They said, why do you want to spend money on astronomy when we've got problems with housing and food security and water security and so on? We also had a lot of Afro-pessimism, particularly from other countries, who said, you can't build the world's largest and most complex telescope in Africa, can you? And luckily, we ignored both of those pieces of advice. The World Economic Forum predicts that by 2035, more young people will be coming into the workforce than all the rest of the world put together. So that's a challenge and an opportunity. It's an opportunity because Africa will then have the youngest workforce, and the workforce in other countries will be aging. But it's a challenge because if you don't provide skills and jobs, then young people can be a source of great instability. And when I was watching the Euro soccer over the last month or so, what was very noticeable was that people from Africa or African descent were the stars in so many of the football teams. And I asked myself, why is that not true in our leading astronomy teams? Because I think it should be, and we have to change that. So we all know that science and technology is crucial to the development agenda. It has to be basic in all of our countries in Africa. So we started our SKA bid at the beginning of 2003, and our urban planner, Shireen Rawat, chose a number of options for sites. And the photo on the left is George Nicholson, who was then the director of the Hartbeespoort Radio Astronomy Observatory, with Shireen looking at some of the sites. And on the right, you can see the mobile cabins that we dragged around South Africa and to our neighboring states to measure radio frequency interference. And we were able to send in an expression of interest. There were 5 countries that bid. That was in May 2003. And eventually, after a lot more measurements and submissions, in 2006, the African bid, together with the Australian and New Zealand bid, was shortlisted for the SKA site. And there's a photo which must have been in 2011 of us finalizing our bid for the SKA. Adrian put together with Kim 45,000 pages, which was probably a bit of overkill for the people who had to read it, but they obviously did read it and they seemed to like it. So in 2003, that was what our Karoo site looked like. That was the one we chose eventually. As you can see flying over it, it's very arid, it's very remote, and we thought the hills would provide useful protection against radio frequency interference. And on the right, you can see a picture of Professor Justin Jonas, who was our associate director, telling me where we're going to build the SKA, pointing at Losberg. And during the process of the bidding, the South African Parliament passed a law called the Astronomy Geographic Advantage Act, and that empowers the Minister of Science and Technology to control any activities in the whole of the Northern Cape province which could interfere with astronomy. And as you can see, the Northern Cape is a pretty big part of South Africa's entire land area. And this is a map of population. You can see Johannesburg and Durban and Gqeberha and Cape Town, and this part is pretty empty. And there you can see the area around our site. There's the site, and there's Carnarvon, 80 kilometers away. And as you can see, there's not much there besides some sheep. So we had to establish a site on a very remote piece of land. Adrian with Eskom designed this low interference power line. We had to build 80 kilometers of road that's now tarred. We had to connect optical fiber to South Africa's backbone several hundred kilometers away. We had to reticulate the site. There's Tracy Cheetham, who was our infrastructure manager, is now the SKA infrastructure manager for Southern Africa, switching on the power. And we also built infrastructure at the farm called Losberg, which is the core site for the SKA. So you can see here there's a buried bunker, which has got the power supplies, the backup power supplies. It's also got the racks, the computer racks, and the hydrogen mazes, and all the other things that we need. And there's a dish shed to build the dishes for the MeerKAT telescope. So in 2012, an independent committee, which was chaired by Jim Moran from Harvard, recommended the Africa bid. The International SKA board then decided on a compromise with the SKA low in Australia and the SKA mid in Africa. The board also decided on a cost cap for the first phase of the SKA, which required a bit of descoping. So we now have the two sites, as you're aware, and you'll have seen the low antenna in the SKAO pavilion here, and you'll have seen the pictures of the first dish going up in the Karoo. But there's now 130,000 hectares of land there, which the NRF owns, and that's been handed over to SANParks, South African National Parks, to manage as a wilderness area, and all the rights of way and servitudes are in place, so we're really good to go. And of course, you can't do this without community involvement. And I must say, I'm very out of date. I was really blown away by what I saw. I recommend you go to the Soraya Pavilion. The amount of involvement of the local community and the crafts and other activities are quite amazing. So we had consultative committees, we had meetings with the community, we assisted small businesses to develop, but we focused on providing training opportunities for young people and to strengthen the schools, and that was our major focus. But as I say, I'm out of date, and I strongly recommend you go and have a look at the Soraya Pavilion, because it really is remarkable what's happened there. And there have been tremendous benefits. 23,000 full-time equivalent jobs have been created. There have been a large number of bursaries to school pupils, 259, and a whole range of scholarships for artisan training and so on. So in 2004, our South African Steering Committee decided to build a science demonstrator, which we called the Karoo Array Telescope. It was planned to have 20 dishes. And the idea was to develop our technology and science expertise, to give it a focus for the development of a radio astronomy community. And in case we didn't win the bid, it was to give us something to use even in the absence of the SKA. So we decided to build a general purpose telescope as an SKA precursor with the same technology, more or less. And then our National Treasury came up with extra funding, so we were able to go from 20 dishes to 80 dishes. We planned initially prime focus dishes, and the Afrikaans for more of the Karoo Array telescope is Meer, so we decided to call it the MeerKAT. So that's how it became the MeerKAT telescope. And eventually, as most of you will know, we changed from the 80 prime focus dishes to 64 offset Gregorian dishes. So we constructed 2 prototypes, the XDM, which is a glass fiber dish, the world's largest glass fiber dish at that time, which is at Hartbeespoort near Pretoria. And then we did a 7-dish prototype in the Karoo called CAT7, which worked so well it was actually used for science, not just engineering. And eventually 64 13.5 meter diameter dishes were built on an 8-kilometer maximum baseline. There are currently 3 cooled single pixel receiver systems, UHF, L-band and S-band, and we digitize the signal on the dish, which I'll talk about a bit later. It's got very good sensitivity and imaging and gets high survey speed from the good sensitivity. And we designed it also for commensal observing, so the digitized signal is broadcast to simultaneous users. And the amazing thing is it was completed on schedule and to budget. Not only that, but because of the excellent engineering work, we got twice as much sensitivity than we'd paid for no extra money. And now, of course, with the collaboration of the Max Planck Institute and INAF from Italy, the MeerKAT extension is being built, 20 more dishes on a 17-kilometer baseline. So that's a picture of our dishes, which are good up to 25 gigahertz. And you can see the receiver systems there on the indexer with the digitizers and the other services. And those are the cryogenic receivers that were built for us that worked so well. So in doing the MeerKAT project, we had a number of advantages. First of all, none of us had built a radio telescope before, and we didn't claim to know what we should build, unlike many other countries. We also didn't have to cater to the vested interest of a large astronomical community. There were only 5 radio astronomers, most of them on our project anyway. And we could hire excellent engineers who were very good radio and radar engineers and mechanical engineers, but they didn't know anything about astronomy. Another important advantage was that our mandate was to build the best possible telescope, not necessarily to develop new technology. Many of the other countries which were building precursors had to be able to persuade their governments that they would develop new technology in order to get money. And we luckily didn't have to do that because our politicians trusted us. So we made a number of important decisions as well. First of all, as I said earlier, it was a project of the government, but we were outside most of the bureaucratic structures, although the project has been more and more drawn in, and I won't say anything too much about that since the NRF is represented here at a very high level. But if they hadn't been, I would have said it's not necessarily a good thing to draw Soraya more and more into the bureaucratic structures, but I won't say that now. We were lucky also in that we had a top-level, highly accessible steering committee with the head of the Science and Technology Department, the president of the National Research Foundation. So initially we met every Monday morning at 7 o'clock in the morning, and we could get decisions very quickly. We built a telescope which was cutting edge, but not, as Justin Jonas used to call it, bleeding edge. So it was sort of mature technology, but not too mature. We also decided that we should have an engineering project, not one that was driven by scientists, because we knew that scientists want to continually expand the scope, and we wanted to actually build a telescope. So we made an engineering project. We decided to use system engineering, but with the flexibility for R&D, because we were not building a nuclear submarine or a NASA spaceship. We also decided that we would make our own decisions, so we would hear what our colleagues overseas were saying, but we wouldn't be bound by that. And of course, underlying all of this was a commitment to using the project to develop skills and expertise. So the system engineering, I think, was a basis for our success. Our Cat7 prototype and the MeerKAT did science when they were switched on, which I think surprised everybody. We used a flexible but rigorous system engineering model, and the way it works is you start with a user requirement specification, what your system has got to achieve, including the key science projects. And then from there you go down to the system spec. What do you have to build in order to achieve that user spec? And then you go down to the subsystems. What subsystems do you have to build to produce that system? And then you go to the component specification, and you do rapid prototyping. So you fail early and you correct early. It's much more expensive to do it later. So on our Cat7, we tried Stirling coolers, and we realized they don't work. And then we tested focal plane arrays, and we decided they wouldn't give us the sensitivity we needed. And we tried multi-turret feeds, and we decided that those weren't right either. So those things we discarded very early on, and we went forward from there. Then once you've done that rapid prototyping and you've got everything in place, you verify that the components, the subsystems, and the whole system achieve their specs. And of course, you've got to do this with a very high attention to detail. And each subsystem team had a lot of autonomy. We said, this is what you have to do, get on and do it. And they had their own system engineers, and they worked with a great deal of commitment. And we benefited a lot from international advice and expertise, but we did our own thing where necessary. At that time, system engineering was not used universally. Also, there was a belief that to save money, because dishes are the most expensive part of the telescope, you can build floppy dishes and then correct your bad beam in software, and we didn't believe that, and we decided to build the best telescope we could, and our colleagues at the NRAO fully supported us, which gave us a warm feeling. We digitized the signal on the dish, which was also not common practice, because the digitizers can generate self-generated RFI, but it was done so well that that was minimized. And we also decided that the flavor of the month at the time, which was wide field of view uncooled receivers, wouldn't work for us. So we decided to have the single pixel cooled, very sensitive receivers. And the cost optimization, we also realized that silver bullets don't work. So the way we did it was to optimize the system and each subsystem very thoroughly as it was designed, and then in the construction stage. We brought some industry in-house, such as the company EMSS, and there was an exceptional focus and attention on detail. And in the photo you can see, you can see, okay, well you could if the laser was, there we are. That's Omar and Francois with one of our roach boards that was designed as part of the Casper collaboration and was led from Cape Town. We mitigated risk by hiring the best people. We had small and lean teams, a lot of autonomy and trust from our steering committee, good communications. We had excellent support from our international colleagues. Also, very importantly, we knew what could be outsourced and what couldn't, and how you can outsource for the best productivity. We had an excellent relationship with South African industry, but also with big international high-tech companies such as NVIDIA, Xilinx, Cisco, and Intel, and they were very open with their new hardware and also with their roadmaps, which was very important. And when we came to participating in the design of the square kilometre array itself, South African companies were reluctant to get into that, so our Treasury approved the setting up of a technology development fund where we could share the risk with South African companies, and many of them have now got SKA contracts. And quite early on, we realized that the volume of data that was going to be generated was huge. And so I asked our software teams to build what I call the serendipity machine, because I asked the question, when Jocelyn Bell was discovering pulsars, what she was doing was reading mile after mile of paper charts, and you could see there were wheels on it. But when you've got a bucket of multi-dimensional data points, petabytes of them, you can't just look at this bucket and say, oh, that looks strange, I wonder what it is. So I asked them to look at the serendipity machine, which would go through all these buckets of data and say, oh, that looks odd, I wonder what it is. And Michelle Loughner's team at the University of the Western Cape and others have done excellent work. Michelle's program is called Astronomaly. And as I understand it, this machine learning finds what they call latent spaces or manifolds. We need to think about how we relate those to physical quantities, but what you then do is you look for objects that either aren't on the manifold at all or are on the manifold but separate from where everything else is. And then you follow up those outliers. And my concern there is, are there enough graduate students in the entire universe to follow up all the outliers that are going to be generated by the SKA and the Vera Rubin Observatory and all the other huge telescopes that are coming online. And obviously we'll have to take artificial intelligence further, not only in following up, but even analyzing survey data and anomalies and linking multi-wavelength data. And I believe there's a lot of work going on in that area. I think it's crucial. And also one thing that worries me is that we're now getting huge archives of data, and there's a risk that they won't be looked at because everybody has to chase soft money. So you always want to go onto new surveys before you've really had a chance to go into the old surveys. So Oleg Smirnov and Ian Haywood and their team are processing the MeerKAT archive, finding very interesting transients. Cyril Tuss, I believe, is doing that on LOFAR data. I really think it'll be tragic if we throw away our archive data because it's a vital resource for researchers who don't necessarily have the resources to get direct observing time on major instruments. And I was chatting to Min Win about ASCAP. They also have a very nice archive which has data cubes and images, and we should be using that sort of thing more than we are, I think. So the MeerKAT has performed very well, 330 papers published since July 2018. I was talking to Roger Blandford recently, the professor from Stanford, and he said the MeerKAT's even better than you read in the press. So I thought that was quite a nice comment. And as you know, the square kilometre array, I beg your pardon, it should be the MeerKAT Plus. I apologize for that. It's under construction. The first SKA 15-metre dish is now on site, and MeerKAT will be absorbed into SKA Mid when there are enough dishes to justify the transfer, which Phil Diamond assures me is 2028. And I hope he's right, because I want to be able to apply for time on it. So there's the handover of the first MeerKAT Plus dish in January this year. The main spin-off for me, although there have been other commercial spin-offs, the main spin-off for me of the MeerKAT project has been in expertise. And a nice example is what happened when COVID hit us. Our Minister of Trade and Industry was deluged with offers from all around the world to supply him with ventilators. And he called us and we said, well, why don't we do this properly? And we got the Soraya engineers together with medical doctors and lawyers, and they very quickly agreed on a constant air pressure ventilator. And our Soraya team developed the design and conducted a tender process within a couple of weeks, and then South African industry produced 20,000 ventilators at a cost of 12,500 Rand each. And this was really a very successful project which depended on the expertise from Soraya. And one of the Soraya system engineers is actually working with Eskom, helping them improve their generator capacity, which is why you haven't had any load shedding recently. So thanks to Poncho for that. Poncho's made sure we don't get load shedding. So as I mentioned, one of the major motivators for this was to build STEM careers in Africa and astronomy community. And there were a number of major programs that have contributed to that. Unfortunately, I can't talk about all of them. The SKA South Africa, which is now SKA, Human Capital Development Program, which is a pipeline to take young people from school all the way through to early career research. SKA has an intern program. The development in Africa with radio astronomy, the DARA program, and later the DARA Big Data program, which has been run by Bonita de Swart and people from the UK, Anna Scaife and Melvin Hoare in particular. The National Astronomy and Space Science Program, NASP, which Mpati will talk about. The AVN, African VLBI Network project, which we started, and which has now become the SKA Africa program. The African Astronomical Society is growing rapidly and is catalyzing a lot of activity around the continent. And of course, the IAU Office of Astronomy for Development has been active, and the Pan-African School is also very active. So remember, in South Africa, we come from a history of apartheid. The photo there is a classroom in the 1960s. The apartheid government's theory was that black people, according to the Bible, are only hewers of wood and drawers of water, so the education should be appropriate to that. And that created a huge backlog for an entire generation. So in 2003, when we started the project, we had 5 radio astronomers in South Africa, and they were all white men. And all our engineers were white men, except Clifford Gumedi, Anita Lurtz, and Tracy Cheetham. And I'm glad to say it's different now. So I won't talk about NASP because Mpati's going to talk about that, except to say that 17 of the NASP graduates are now teaching in their home countries. The SKA HCD program, which we launched in 2005, was driven by Kim de Boer Anthony, who's here with us now, Daphne Lekwati, Bonita, and their team. And its clear objective was to bring young people in Africa into astronomy and engineering, give them world-class skills, create a vibrant radio astronomy community, and transform the research community. It was intended to be a long-term program to build capacity. And as I said, it was based on creating a pipeline, so you don't just take people and then drop them, you stay with them until they're in an early research career. We had to extend the program. Initially, it was just for graduate study. We realized there were not enough young black students coming through in engineering and astronomy, so we extended the program to bring people into undergraduate study as well. And we offered preferential access for students from the small towns around the site in the Karoo, but we found that very few kids were actually passing the school leaving exams in maths and science, so we couldn't give them university scholarships. So what we did was to bring in teachers to the Carnarvon High School, and then we gave scholarships to kids from the surrounding towns to come and live in Carnarvon and attend the high school there. And we also extended the program to train technicians and artisans because we discovered that people who are born in the area are more likely to want to work there, and people who are not from the area don't stay long. So we started training young people then, and on the left you'll see, you'll see our first undergraduate bursary holders. And Kirtley, I believe, last week gave a donation for 3 cups, 3 awards to be given in Carnarvon to the best performing school pupils. He's now working in Cape Town. We also started artisan training, and we trained contractors, small contractors, so that they could benefit from the various opportunities in road building and construction, in catering and accommodation and so on. And we created the SKA research chairs to create strong groups at the universities. There were 5 research chairs, later 6. They're funded for 15 years with a review every 5 years. I think they've been extremely successful in creating these vibrant groups at the universities. And there's a summary of the Human Capital Program grants. You can see that there are nearly 2,000 of them. They've supported the research chairs and faculty positions, 34 grants there, and a number of artisans, 130 artisans, 84 national diplomas, and so on. Anyone who wants to ask questions, there's Kim sitting in the row. So the success factors, I think, are largely because our program had a lot of autonomy, a lot of independence to make decisions and not have to fit into a one-size-fits-all. So one important thing was that all our scholarships covered the full cost. Remember that kids from disadvantaged backgrounds don't have families who can subsidize them. So if you don't cover their costs, then they starve and they don't do well in their research. You also have to go out and be proactive. Students at schools who don't know what a career in astronomy or engineering means are not going to come forward. So you have to go and look for kids. You have to be proactive. You also have to be very hands-on because students from disadvantaged backgrounds don't have the social capital, the understanding of how to manipulate the world to your own benefit. So our team has been very hands-on with the students so that they feel that someone cares about them. And most of these students are the first in their families to go to university. So the families expect them, when they've got their first degree, that they should go out and work so that they can pay for their siblings to go through education. And we worked out a scheme with our research chairs to supplement the scholarships and fellowships so that students could continue to postgraduate study and not be dragged back into getting jobs immediately. I believe that this is being stopped. I think that will be a very bad idea. Very importantly also, the students feel part of a team. So at the end of every year, the program has a week-long conference where everybody gets together. Every student has to present a paper. It's good for them. They feel part of a team. They meet international researchers, and they get used to presenting their work. So there's a summary of the grants from 2005 to 2024. You can see most of them are directed towards black African people and women, and we're trying to rectify the small number of, relatively small number of women and of black students. And one of the very notable things about this program is that the graduation rate is in the 90%. If you compare that with other national programs, you'll see that the graduation rates are in the 20% as compared to the 90%. And I think that's because of the hands-on and very caring way in which the program is run. Our SKA chairs have been asked what their views are on the program, and one thing that stands out is that we don't have enough supervisors. We've got a very big cohort of early career researchers, but we need more supervisors. And if you're an international, well-known and prominent researcher and you want to co-supervise, I think you should go and talk to Oleg and the others. I'm sure they'll be very happy to co-supervise with you. The internship program's also, I think, been very exciting. It was highly competitive and the best interns get jobs. And just, this is a very old photo from 2015. This guy's a lecturer at UWC. She's got a postdoc in Toronto. Oleg is still at Rhodes University, where he has been for a long time. She's got her own high-tech business going in Johannesburg, and he's the manager of our digital signal processing and receiver team, and other things. So I think that's been successful. This is a picture of the 2023 end of the year Human Capital Conference. You can see there are a lot of students there, and I think they enjoy it, and I think their supervisors enjoy it, and I think people like Rob Fender and others enjoy it, but Rob can speak for himself. Then one other thing that we did was the African VLBI network. We realized that our African partner countries weren't going to get dishes for some time. So Mike Gaylord, who was at Heart at the time, suggested we look at redundant satellite dishes and convert them. So we started with a 32-meter dish at Kutunzi in Ghana, which turned out to be in very poor condition, had to be almost completely rebuilt. And the operation there at Kutunzi was used for training astronomers and operators and even artisans. And the operations there are now funded by Dual Use, so there's an American company which does satellite communication, which have put their dish on the site, and their rent pays the operations for Kutunzi. And of course, the African millimeter telescope is going to be built in Namibia. There's an SKA dish being put in Botswana by the Max Planck Institute, and MeerKAT will also be part of VLBI. So the African VLBI network, I think, is eventually going to come true, and I think it's going to be a spectacular network. So this is just some pictures of the Kutunzi dish, and there's Ghana, there's Justin helping people. This is a team in Ghana being trained by Anita Lurtz, and there's Anita with a team in Ghana at Kutunzi training people. And out of all of this came the DARA project, the development in Africa with radio astronomy, which has been a wonderful project. It's co-funded by the South African Department of Science and Innovation and the Newton Fund of the UK. They've recently got another £7 million to renew it. It does a basic training program in radio astronomy, and then it takes students to South Africa and the UK to do masters and PhD. They've had 326 students through the basic training, and 26 masters have graduated and 9 PhDs. And because that was so successful, we were able to start the DARA Big Data program in 2018, which goes wider than astronomy. It uses big data techniques for things like climate change, agriculture, and so on. There are 8 universities in Africa outside South Africa and 9 UK universities, and then 9 institutions in South Africa are all part of this. One of their projects at the moment is constructing small radio telescopes in the African countries. And very excitingly, the new money is going to be used to create 12 postdoc positions in African universities. And we'll have to make sure those people don't become isolated. There's got to be good cooperation across Africa and with the rest of the world. So there's one of the small telescopes which is being built. It was designed in New Zealand. First one was put in Mauritius, and another one will be installed in Kenya towards the end of August, I'm told. And there you can see a workshop on the installation, which was held at Rhodes University last year. And this is a picture of one of our data science workshops, also happened to be at Rhodes. And that's the 4th Africa Big Data School in Cape Town in 2023. Note that 18 of the 25 students were women. That was on International Women's Day. And you can see that this is actually getting a lot more women into these subjects than we'd hoped. So AFAS is the African Astronomical Society, now has 390 members. It's growing fast, and it's generated a lot of progress across Africa. And for the details, I suggest you read an excellent report which Charles Takalana has written. I'm sure Charles will be able to give it to you. There are 28 countries involved, and approximately 70% men and 30% women. But there is an African network for women in astronomy. So a lot more telescopes are being built, optical telescopes and radio telescopes, HIRAX, the African millimeter telescope, the dish in Botswana, and so on. But our big challenge remains that we're producing a cohort of really excellent early career researchers. There's a notable gap between them and the few senior researchers. How do we facilitate the retention of these young people in astronomy and instrumentation? How do we allow them to move on to senior research positions? Because we're going to continue to produce these excellent young astronomers. We want them to have a career. And I'm looking forward to a time when our astronomy teams internationally represent as many African stars as the football teams. Thank you, and I'll ask Mpati to take over now.
Hi, everybody. I am Mpati Ramatsoku, as Bernie has mentioned. Firstly, I'd like to thank the organizers of this amazing conference led by Kevin Govender. Thank you to Bernie for inviting me to talk to you today. This is a super huge venue. So what I'm going to do is just give you a little bit of the background, my educational background, tell you how I got into astronomy, what I am doing now, and what are some of the challenges that are facing people in early careers, such as myself. So just to give you a little bit of a background, I was born in the Free State, which is represented by that red pin. I was born in the Eastern Free State, which is a very small town where there isn't a lot of light population. And at around the age of, 12 to 14, I'd go outside, look at the stars, and just be fascinated by all the different colors I was seeing. Why were other stars twinkling and others didn't? Why were some red? I later learned that was a planet. And while others were moving fast, those would be satellites, and so on and so forth. And so from middle school, from intermediate school, I decided that what I would like to do is to be an astrophysicist. And so throughout my high school, all I ever did was to work very hard to make sure that I get to be this astrophysicist. And so when I finished high school, I packed my bags, traveled about 1,500 kilometers to the University of Cape Town. At the time, UCT was the only university that was offering BSc in astrophysics. There was also a young researcher there by the name of Tebe Midupe, because presentation matters, who was going all around the country doing outreach, just making people aware of astronomy. I got to meet amazing mentors and supervisors, one of whom is here today, René Krank-Kottewach. All of my undergraduate at UCT was supported through the NASP and the Sarau HCD programs, which I will get into in a little bit. After my bachelor's, my master's, I moved to Groningen in the Netherlands at the Kaptein Institute, where I did a joint PhD with the University of Cape Town, doing amazing H1 science. After spending about 4 years in Groningen, I decided I would like to be somewhere a little bit sunny, and so it's very dark. And so when I was offered a postdoc in Sardinia, in Italy, I said yes, that is exactly where I would like to be. And so after my PhD, I moved to INAF in Cagliari, where I stayed for a couple of years. I am now back at Rhodes University, working with Oleg and the team at the Rhodes Center for Radio Astronomy. As I mentioned, I was part of NASP, which is this multi-institutional initiative that was designed specifically to train young astrophysics and space science program students in honors and masters. I have the QR code over there if you would like to know more about them. We had an amazing time during NASP. These are some of my colleagues whom I've seen today. That's in the middle, that's young Michelle. A lot of them have gone on to do amazing things in research. Some senior lecturers at universities. Gopelang, which is this person over here, is an assistant professor in Canada. Eli is a senior lecturer at the University of Namibia. You have Michelle, who's a senior lecturer at the University of Cape Town. So they've all gone on to do amazing things. It is through these programs, the NASP program, the SARA Human Capital Development Program, that I was able to do the incredible science that I think I have been able to do. If you want to know more actually about the SARA HCD, see a poster also by Mtutuzeli Samgaka, which is poster number 28552. The amazing things about this program was that it wasn't just about lectures. We would take these incredible trips. We were part of teams, and these people ended up being my colleagues. I've been lucky to be able to do amazing science, so these are some of my highlights of my career so far. I was able to study hidden structures behind the Milky Way, confirming some previous unconfirmed claims. I've been able to study jellyfish galaxies, which, if anybody knows me, I really love talking about jellyfish galaxies. We currently got some referee reports of the galaxy over here, which is thanks to MeerKAT and the incredible innovation of MeerKAT. It is now the best described and observed jellyfish with all gas phases. So, yay, MeerKAT. I've gotten the chance to study filaments feeding huge galaxy clusters and understand the different mechanisms that affect those kinds of galaxies. Again, this is thanks to MeerKAT. In fact, most of my research is just done with MeerKAT data. But one of the most amazing things was that we were able to uncover unknowns. This is galaxy ISO 137001, within which we discovered these incredible filaments that are connecting the radial lobes. We still are not quite sure what these are. We were seeing these for the very first time when we looked at this image. The funny thing about this galaxy was that we weren't actually really interested in it. When we were processing these data, we were planning to observe this data. Our project technical lead at the time, Spesihle Makatini, said, you know what, we should point our telescope at the center of the image because there's this bright source. It's going to be annoying. We need to be able to remove it because it's going to cause calibration errors. And because of that decision, we were able to discover this without even expecting it to be there. We still don't quite know what causes these things, probably magnetic fields, but who knows, it's new. So I've been able to do this incredible science thanks to MeerKAT and these amazing initiatives, human capital initiatives, incredible technological innovations. And I'm excited. I'm excited about the future. I hope I get to stay in research for quite some time to continue doing this research. I was at a conference in Pisa recently, and somebody showed this slide. They were talking about wide field spectroscopy, etc. I looked at this slide and I thought, whoa, this is a lot of data. This is going to be a lot of data. These are many telescopes at many wevelengths. These don't even show what we already have now, particularly in the radio, which is where I work. It doesn't show MeerKAT. We're not showing ASCAP. So I wondered, are we building enough capital to explore all of these data sets? Because these are going to create a lot of data. Our chief scientist, every time we try to get time on the telescopes, always says, but you already have so much data in the archives, you really need more. So this is going to continue being a problem if we aren't supporting enough people getting into positions in which they're able to explore these data sets fully. Yes, we will have AI, which will be great, and it will help a lot, the great work that Michelle is doing and others. But I think in the end, you'll still need a human being to really look at these data sets completely. And so I went and looked at the numbers. I spoke to Ross Skelton. I said, Ross, can I please have some slides because I need to know what the 20 years of human capital in astronomy look like and how many people have been supported and how many of those actually remained in astronomy. These are the two plots. The first one is just a cumulative distribution of the number of graduates from 2003 to 2024-ish, 2023. And the one at the bottom is from the Sarao HCD program. Between these two programs, there might be an overlap between here and then. Approximately 2,000 people have been trained, have gone through national diplomas, undergraduate, masters, PhDs, postdocs. A lot of those people, a majority of them, were from South Africa, with the rest from the rest of the continent. So I started to wonder, where exactly are all of these people? What happened to them? In this slide over here, this is again from the NESP at 20 workshop, which was recently held. This map shows you where people ended up being. They recently ran a survey, and about 250 people responded. And they found that about 60% of the people have actually remained in research. Majority of them are in South African universities and research facilities like Sarao, SAO, Sanza, IDEA. The rest have gone off to do other things like engineering, business, some work in government. And I plotted the same, I made the same pie chart for the Sarao HCD, and these are the same numbers, so these numbers are a bit consistent. So about 60% of people have stayed. This is great. But those people aren't really in permanent positions wherever they are. They're in postdocs, or they're in these contract jobs that are not completely stable. And so in my last slide, I would just like to sort of highlight some of the things that are a bit of a challenge in research, as an early career person. They say in South Africa it takes about 20 years to become a full professor. That is when your job is secure. However, our funding models need a bit of improvement, because the director of NRF is here just looking at me. because studying for about 10 years is unfortunately a luxury that very few can afford in South Africa, and perhaps in many parts of the world. I'm not even including the 10 years that one would be spending in careers where they have to keep moving and with secure jobs. And so around when I was around here, I started talking to some of my colleagues who are in early research, and just asking them, how are you? How are you doing? Why are you still in astronomy? And what are some of the challenges that you're facing? And these were kind of the four main themes that I received. A lot of them say they get into post-PhD positions, but they don't have mentorship, so they don't know what they're doing when they start these amazing positions in early career. Some said they are tired of moving every 2 years. They don't have time to actually settle and establish their research niche. 2 years is not enough time to be able to do that, which is 2 to 3 years, which is the duration of a typical postdoc. And those who ended up going into the universities and teaching are so loaded with teaching duties that they never have time to actually do the research that they like to do, or that they got into this to be able to do. Others say, well, there simply aren't enough permanent jobs. To be a professor takes a very, very long time, and there aren't enough positions at universities. So I think what we need are just more permanent research positions. But what I will say is this. The HCD programs works, and I'm very glad for the work that Kim and the team have have done. When I was a student, I wasn't aware of how much happens in the background. Now I am, and I'm very grateful that I didn't have to be aware of that. These programs work, and it's really through the deliberate technological innovations that was combined with the HCD program, so the need to build human beings who would be using these incredible telescopes, that I was able to pursue my dream career in astronomy. My greatest hope is that these programs will continue getting funded, they will grow, and we could try to address some of these issues that early career researchers are facing, and that hopefully one day a young girl from the Eastern Free State will not have to travel 1,500 kilometers just to study astronomy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, really, Berner and Ramatsoku, briefing the genesis of radio astronomy in South Africa and overall the highlights and the important talks in astronomy and also the career. Then if you have questions, then 2 questions, 3 questions. Then if you have any question. Okay? Any? Okay.
My question to Bernie. So you said SKA dishes MeerKAT will be handed over to SKO after 2028. So what do you think is the most important thing to do before that?
Yenji, thank you for that question. I think the most important thing is to get as much as you can out of MeerKAT and MeerKAT extension. It's working so well, let's utilize it as far as we can. I think if we continue the current rate of production, it's going to do great things. Phil assures me 2028, there'll be enough SK mid dishes to absorb the MeerKAT, so you've got at least 3 years. People who are experienced in construction would probably say add a year or 2 to that, but I believe everything Phil tells me, so 2028 is the date.
Any other question?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So, I mean, I thought there was kind of an interesting tension between the 2 parts of your talk, which I recognize very much, and I wonder what the general thoughts about that are in South African society, because it happens in more societies, and that's that, of course, astronomy is a beautiful flag on the ship of STEM, and you use it to lure people into STEM and to develop, high-tech and scientific capital in the community, but not just for the benefit of astronomy. But then, of course, you get people into astronomy and it turns out to be a powerful drug. People, once they are in, would like to stay in astronomy. And then, so, you hope for more jobs in astronomy because you'd like to stay there. So there's a bit of an inherent tension there, right? You use astronomy to support a system that is bigger than astronomy alone. And once you get people in, those people actually like it so much that they would like to stay. So how do you deal with that inherent tension that we build into our system that way?
I think Mpati should also comment on this, but as you'll have seen from some of the data we showed, there is a significant drift of people out of astronomy into other jobs in the economy. But I think there's also a very important public outreach function, which is just to interest young people in science and engineering and to give them some idea of what is involved. So not all the kids who hear about astronomy from Carnarvon will go into astronomy, but they may well go into engineering or technical work, or study physics or study some other science, which they wouldn't have done if astronomy hadn't been that high-profile science. And Khotso Mokheli's comment, I think, is very important, that astronomy is the kind of science that the public is very interested in. It's more difficult to explain to them about fractures in solid-state physics or phonons or whatever. But Mpati may want to say something.
So very shortly, I think the issue is just that by the time people get to early career researcher, they are at certain points of their lives. And the way things work currently are designed in such a way that they are not compatible with that stage of life, unfortunately. This is why we need to improve on them so that we could retain these people.
Okay, the last one question, the last one, if you have any. Okay.
So it's a question with a comment. So, you know, we sort of invested over the years in the HCD, right? Sort of to bring in more and more young people into the system. And as we've seen, most of them end up falling off, you know, towards the end because they cannot get, you know, full position. Is it not time that we sort of reverse the system for a while? You know, maybe just reduce on the investment bringing people in, and sort of put it into now retaining them for a while still investing slightly in bringing more people in. Then that way, you know, you also create the positions for those people that are now coming in up in the system. And then, you know, as the need would dictate, then you see how you would then put in your investment to sort of create a balance.
Thank you very much for.
It's a cool comment, actually.
Sorry, can I comment on that? First of all, I think you should all read Charles's report on the African Astronomical Society, because he covers there a lot of the very exciting things that are happening all over Africa. And I understand that, for instance, countries like Ethiopia and Rwanda want to participate in the SKA now and so on. So there's been a definite growth of interest around the continent, which the African Astronomical Society is helping to catalyze. But as to the question whether you can stop, I think there are other people who are better qualified than I am to answer that. But I think it's a bit of a problem if you say to people, we're not going to take any more youngsters into the system, and then they're going to say, okay, but you know, you told us that this was so exciting, and now you're saying you can't offer us anything. I think the negative vibes from that would not be good. You may want to talk about switching some money in the budget, but you know, if I were you, I would be going along to people in the NRF and saying, we know that your budget has been strained, and we know that the Treasury wants to take money away from you, but even so, don't you think that you need to enhance even further the programs which you've already initiated to take early career and mid-career scientists into more senior positions? But I do think we also have to look at the issue of mentorship. Mpati's made the point that there's not always enough mentorship. The SKA, the Soraya chairs, have made the point that they're very open to collaboration on co-supervision, because we just don't have enough senior supervisors here. So again, let me appeal to people in the audience that if they want to co-supervise, they should certainly come forward.
Okay, thank you very much. Let us really thank again the two speakers, and thank you very much. Thank you.